You know, if it's not about sports, I find it very hard to concentrate.
What is up, guys? Braden here, and today we are going to be talking about the famous rant by Oklahoma State head football coach Mike Gundy, where he exclaims, "Come after me, I'm a man, I'm 40. On September 22nd, 2007, Mike Gundy drank a Red Bull as he prepared to walk into a room filled with reporters and media personnel and give a post-game press conference. Oklahoma State had just defeated Texas Tech. Normally a win is cause for celebration, but Mike Gundy was not happy on this occasion. For you see, he had just read a newspaper article that made him very angry, and in his hand he held that very newspaper. He intended to walk into that post-game press conference and address it to the media. Let's talk about this character Mike Gundy for a minute. Mike Gundy was and still is the head football coach at Oklahoma State University, a position he had held for just a little over 2 seasons when the infamous rant took place in 2007. Prior to getting hired as head coach at his alma mater, Gundy had never held a head coaching position, working his way up from wide receivers coach at OSU, then eventually quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator, and assistant head coach under Les Miles, before Miles ditched the Cowboys for the glamour of the SEC and the LSU Tigers. And Gundy, a man who had once took snaps under center for Oklahoma State, was named the next head coach. Of course, his playing days were long behind him now. After all, in 2007, he was a man of 40 years old, and it seemed like an eternity since he had put on shoulder pads and a helmet and led the Cowboys to back-to-back double-digit win seasons in 87 and 88, as well as back-to-back bowl victories. But those memories weren't exactly in the front of his mind that day in Stillwater. As he entered the room, stood in front of the podium, he prepared to take care of business. In southern Texas in the early 2000s, a talented young quarterback began impressing college scouts. His name was Bobby Reid. Reid played for North Shore High School in Houston, Texas, and he led his team to a 5A state title in 2003, and many people around the Houston area thought that he had what it took to go pro. They thought they'd see this dude on Sundays. As you can imagine, a lot of big-time programs were interested. Jim Tressel and Ohio State came calling, but Mike Gundy had his sights set on Reid too, and he took a little trip down to Houston to speak to the young man in person. Gundy cracked open his favorite drink, a Red Bull. He offered Reid one. They drank their Red Bulls together, talked, cracked jokes, and they soon became fast friends. Reid knew he was going to Oklahoma State.
I'm Bobby Reid. Welcome to my world.
Bobby Reid graduated high school early in 2004 and headed to Stillwater to participate in spring practices. Les Miles and Mike Gundy wanted to start Reid right away, as they thought they had found their next great quarterback. This demonstrated their faith in the young fella, and Reid was honored. It made him like Mike Gundy even more. But unfortunately, Bobby Reid took a hit in practice that tore his labrum, which put him on the sideline for the entire season. After a loss in the 2004 Alamo Bowl to Jim Tressel and the Ohio State Buckeyes, Reid lost his head coach Les Miles, but gained a new one in his new pal, Mike Gundy. Gundy promised Reid he was the future of the program. He told Reid to just trust him, he'd make him into a star. The following year in 2005, a toe injury sidelined Reid for 5 weeks, the second straight year that Lady Luck had frowned in his direction with an untimely injury. But Reid persevered. It was easy to stay positive with Mike Gundy in charge. Gundy told him to just hang in there and that glory was just around the corner. A new guy showed up on campus in 2006, a dude named Zach Robinson from Denver, Colorado. He happened to also play quarterback, but Reid wasn't worried one bit. Gundy had promised him that the team was his, and so he operated under that assumption. Reid began the 2006 campaign with some really great games, and even threw for 411 yards and 5 touchdowns against Kansas, which broke the school record for most total yards in a game. But the injury bug bit him yet again the following game. He suffered a concussion against Texas A&M, and Robinson came into the game to take over for Reid, throwing for 3 touchdowns. Gundy secretly began to second-guess his decision to start Reid in the first place, and shared this with his offensive coordinator, Larry Fedora. He felt perhaps Reid ran with his shoulders too high, which opened the door for injuries, and especially concussions. Plus, this new kid Robinson came in and looked pretty damn good. Gundy and Fedora attempted to teach Reid not to run with his shoulders too high, but to no avail. Gundy realized that overall, Robinson was just much more polished. Mike Gundy was quoted as saying, quote, "At times, Reid didn't perform like people wanted him to. Sometimes players play well in games, and then in other games, if things don't go well, they don't. Why does this happen to him? That's hard to answer," unquote. Bobby Reid felt hurt and betrayed by his coach's words. He felt like Mike Gundy no longer trusted him. But from Gundy's perspective, he was just trying to do what was right for the team. But he still felt loyal to Reid, especially because they had connected so well previously. And so, to that end, Mike Gundy made an interesting decision for the season finale against Oklahoma. He decided to play both Robinson and Reid. Reid ended up throwing a touchdown pass with 6:41 left in the game. However, the Sooners were still beating the Cowboys 27-21. The Cowboys got the ball back with a chance to pull the upset. Gundy looked Robinson's way. He gave Zach the nod. Zach Robinson entered the game. Bobby Reid was bewildered. He later said, quote, "I was sitting there like, 'Coach, can I go in? Let me go in, coach.' And he really didn't say nothing. I just blacked out and lost it. I was cursing and going off," unquote. Teammates attempted to calm Bobby down, but Bobby would not stop. He continued to protest Gundy's decision. Robinson failed to lead the team to victory, and Reid threatened to quit the team. But Larry Fedora talked to Reid and convinced him not to quit. He assured Reid that he was still the unquestioned leader. Reid led Oklahoma State to a 34-31 victory over Alabama in the 2006 Independence Bowl, but Gundy called his performance spotty. The relationship with his coach and the man he had once called a friend had now gotten so ugly that Reid barely wanted to be a part of the team any longer. And Gundy, for his part, felt like Reid was a diva who cared about himself more than what was good for the team. A once beautiful friendship had now turned into two guys who were forced to tolerate one another. Bobby was sad, he felt lost, he felt betrayed, and felt like Gundy had stabbed him in the back, and in a sense, he did. The fact of the matter was, Zach Robinson had absolutely won over Gundy. Reid was effectively in the same position a jilted lover would be. He lost not only the starting job, but a friend and mentor in Mike Gundy. Bobby Reid had always been close with his mom. He decided to call her and vent his frustrations. She, of course, talked him through it and made him feel better, just like any good parent would. Later in the season, she came to one of his games, the Troy game, even though he was on the bench. The Cowboys got their asses handed to them by Troy, and Bobby Reid decided to have a post-game meal at Popeyes to make himself feel better. He sat dejected on the curb, eating his chicken and wondering what he should do. His mom came over and she wanted to eat some chicken too, but was interrupted by a reporter, so she just grabbed the box. She began giving the interview, and in the middle of that interview, Bobby decided he wanted more chicken. And so he came over and reached in the box and grabbed another piece and returned to the curb and sat down, eating in silence while his mom spoke to the reporter. When the reporter left, Bobby's mom came over and sat next to him, consoling her son. She told him that he should ask Gundy why he wasn't playing anymore. Bobby agreed that it was a good idea. That Monday, he entered his coach's office and asked if he could have a word with Gundy. Reid explained that he felt hurt and betrayed, but Gundy was cold and dismissive. He told Reid in a cold, matter-of-fact tone that Robinson was just the better quarterback. On the eve of their game against Texas Tech, Bobby Reid considered sneaking out of the hotel and breaking curfew. That way, Mike Gundy would be forced to kick him off the team. However, he decided this was against his better judgment, and instead laid down and went to sleep, his exhaustion and depression giving way to slumber. He went downstairs the following morning for breakfast at the team hotel. It was game day, but he knew he wouldn't be playing. He'd be sitting on cold aluminum for 3 hours. Normally there were newspapers in the lobby, but not today. Reid was in a fog of depression, and so he didn't really notice, but there was a very good reason the hotel was devoid of newspapers. And that was because of one Jenni Carlson, a columnist for the Oklahoman newspaper. An article was published in the paper that she wrote, explaining to readers what she perceived to be the real reason Bobby Reid was benched. She asserted that it was because he was soft. She told readers that his mom fed him chicken following the Troy game. In fact, that was the second line of the article, believe it or not. It was her opinion that he was a coddled baby without any real-world experience and no grit or determination. And although it was a cheap shot, and the chicken thing was not exactly an honest retelling, the fact that the team had to hide all the newspapers from Bobby kind of proved her point. And Carlson's assertions about him being soft and coddled by his mother were things that Oklahoma State coaches were already saying behind closed doors anyway. Perhaps they were not saying it directly to Bobby, but the narrative was being spun and had been spun for quite some time now. The newspaper eventually made its way to Mike Gundy, and as Gundy read the article, he instantly felt his vision go red. He wasn't going to allow some stuck-up media personality to talk shit like that. He was going to get to the bottom of it. The game against Texas Tech ended in a victory for Oklahoma State in front of their home crowd at Boone Pickens Stadium in Stillwater, Oklahoma. But Gundy could not take his mind off the article. He knew he was going to have to address it in his post-game press conference, whether or not the team won. He knew he had to. Messing with a player on his team was like a bully picking on a younger sibling. He knew he had to step in. Following the game, he grabbed one of his favorite beverages, a Red Bull, a drink he used to enjoy with Bobby when the two had those long talks and cracked jokes and laughed. So everything so far in this story has led us up to this point, what you're about to see.
Anybody hasn't read this article, I don't read it. This was brought to me by a mother of children. I think this is worth reading. And let me tell you why I want to talk about this article. 3/4 of this is inaccurate. It's fiction. And this article embarrasses me to be involved with athletics tremendously. If you want to go after an athlete, one of my athletes, you go after one that doesn't do the right things. You don't downgrade him because he does everything right and may not play as well on Saturday, and you let us make that decision. That's why I don't read the newspaper, because it's garbage, and the editor that let it come out is garbage. Attacking an amateur athlete for doing everything right. And then you want to write articles about guys that don't do things right and downgrade them, the ones that do make plays. Are you kidding me? Where are we at in society today? Come after me. I'm a man. I'm 40. I'm not a kid.
So what was Bobby's reaction to all this? Well, he was confused. Mike Gundy had been nothing short of a cold-hearted asshole to him all year, and now he's pretending like he cares? In fact, Reid thought the article was published in the first place because Gundy had been talking shit about him behind his back to the media, and there's no way to know if that's true, but Bobby felt that way and so did his mother. Bobby Reid said, quote, "Honestly, the way I took it, I felt like it was all a front, that it was all a big show. It didn't feel genuine," unquote. Bobby's mom wanted to know why, if Bobby does everything right like Gundy had said in his rant, why wasn't he playing? In the days after the rant, Bobby Reid and his mother waited and expected Gundy to reach out to them, but he didn't, which solidified in their mind that he was only pretending to care. He never once checked in on Bobby and asked him how he was doing throughout the season. Gundy did, however, address it in front of his entire team. He basically said that he was done talking about what he said, and if anybody had any questions, to come see him in his office. Reid sat in the front row as Gundy said this, teammates behind him, and the man he once looked up to, he was now literally looking up to. Gundy didn't care about him, he never did. All those years of friendship, mentorship, and being on the team just down the drain. Man, this hurt real bad. Unfortunately for Bobby, the season was only roughly 25% over, and so Bobby had to stick it out. The next game, fans chanted, "I'm a man, I'm 40. Poor Bobby listened in agonizing silence as he sat on the bench. Bobby Reid cried himself to sleep every night. He tried to distract himself, and so he got on his computer and tried to do some schoolwork, but ended up on a new website called YouTube. YouTube was only about a year old at the time. It is a video sharing site, a site where any random nobody can upload anything. Oh wait, you already know this. I forgot where we are. My bad, boys. Gundy's rant had gone viral on YouTube, and Reid was tortured by seeing it all over again in its full, unedited glory. Robinson, meanwhile, was having one of the best seasons a quarterback had ever had at Oklahoma State, amassing 23 touchdowns and 847 yards rushing, and it wasn't even the midway point of the season yet. This must have felt like your girlfriend leaving you for another man, except then she wins the lottery and you have to watch her buy this guy all sorts of stuff and take him on expensive vacations. In the game against Nebraska, Gundy put Reid into the game with 35 seconds left and the Cowboys leading 45-14, just so he could kneel down. It seemed fucked up and cruel, like a humiliation ritual, puppeted by a sadistic madman named Michael Ray Gundy. Oklahoma State fans yelled at Reid, "Hey Bobby Reid, we don't need you now, game over." Reid skipped the next 2 practices. After the season ended, Reid graduated and left Stillwater. Reid told reporters he intended to enter his name into the 2008 NFL Draft, but Reid completely let his depression and self-pity destroy him. Yes, in a lot of ways he had been wronged, but he refused to move on and let it destroy him. At this point, he looked flatly uncompetitive, with no fire in his heart. Luckily, a man named Johnny Cole came to save him. Cole was the head coach at Texas Southern, located in Reid's hometown of Houston, and Cole came to give him another chance. But he had to make a pretty damn good sales pitch to Bobby because the deadline for entering one's name into the NFL Draft was approaching quickly. He told Reid that he'd make him the center of the offense, which was pro style with bootleg and play action packages, which played incredibly well into Reid's skill set. Johnny Cole told Bobby that he understands the dark place he's in, but things can change quickly, and all it takes is just a year to regain the glory he once had as a promising recruit coming out of high school. He also said, somewhat facetiously, that he didn't drink Red Bull. Bobby smiled. He hadn't smiled in a long time. Reid arrived in Houston to play for Coach Johnny Cole a few months later, and he was happy to be close to his mother. He could visit every day if he wanted to. Bobby Reid only spent 1 season there, passing for 1,791 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions with a 56.7 completion percentage. Obviously, not great numbers, but Reid had gained back his life, a life he once thought was over. He realized he didn't need to be in the NFL to be happy. He didn't need fame or money. Bobby had gone through a hard journey and learned that the narrative about him wasn't true. He wasn't soft. He fought the demons, the depression, the sadness, and he had won. And now that I'm saying this, I realize this video became about much more than a silly rant. It's about surviving emotional torment and coming out the other side a better man. Zach Robinson, for his part, spent a handful of seasons in the NFL and then went into coaching, and is currently the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. If you liked this video, leave a like, and if you hated it, you know what, fuck you, I'm praying on your downfall. Anyway, comment and subscribe. See y'all later.
I can never ever find the right words, and there's no way this is real life. There's no telling you're the right girl, so I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right. It feels right, it feels right. Yeah, I can only say that it feels right.